The night before my wedding was supposed to be a gentle blur of excitement and nerves. It should have been filled with last-minute dress fittings, the soft clinking of champagne glasses to calm my trembling hands, and the warm reassurances of family. Instead, I found myself standing rigid in my parents' living room, a prisoner under the harsh, interrogating glow of a crystal chandelier. My beautiful wedding dress, a symbol of a hopeful future, hung in its protective bag on the couch, looking tragically out of place in the cold, tense atmosphere. My mother, a storm in high heels, circled me like a predator sizing up its prey. The sharp, deliberate click-clack of her heels against the polished hardwood floor was a rhythm I knew well. It was the sound of her power, a constant reminder of who was in control in this house. In the corner, my sister Rachel was a picture of smug satisfaction. She lounged in an armchair, the light from her phone illuminating a cruel smirk that tugged at the corners of her lips. She didn't need to speak a single word. Her eyes, glittering with malicious delight, told the entire story. She was savoring every agonizing second of my torment. "Hold your head up," Mom snapped. Her voice cut through the silence like a whip. She grabbed my chin, her fingers digging into my skin with a force that I knew would leave marks. "Tomorrow, everyone in this town will see you standing next to her," she hissed, her face inches from mine. "Do you have any idea how humiliating that is for me? For this entire family? Look at yourself. You are so plain, so weak. You are nothing." "I'm marrying Daniel," I whispered, the words barely audible. I fought to keep my voice from shaking, to cling to the one piece of happiness I had. That should be enough. Her laugh was a sharp, brittle sound, devoid of any warmth. It was a weapon designed to shatter confidence. "Enough. Darling, you will never be enough." She released my chin with a shove and took a step back, her eyes narrowing as she scanned me from head to toe, searching for every flaw, every imperfection she could use against me. Then, with a chilling lack of hesitation, she lifted her leg. Her heel, a pointed spike of polished red, swung through the air and connected with my cheek. The crack echoed through the silent room, loud and obscene. A blinding flash of pain exploded across the side of my face. I stumbled backward, my hand flying up to clutch my stinging skin as my eyes filled with tears. The coppery, metallic taste of blood filled my mouth before I even had a chance to register the visible wound. Across the room, Rachel gasped. It wasn't a sound of horror or concern, but of pure, unadulterated delight. She leaned forward in her chair, a spectator, eager for a better view of the carnage. Mom wasn't finished. She struck again, the sharp point of the heel, digging into my brow, this time, tearing the skin. "Now you'll look even uglier than your sister," she screamed, her voice raw and filled with a lifetime of resentment and rage. "Do you hear me? Uglier. You will not steal her light tomorrow. You will not." Warm, sticky blood began to drip down my temple, tracing a path down my face. I pressed my palm against the gash, my entire body shaking with shock and pain as I tried to steady myself. My reflection in the grand hallway mirror caught my eye. A distorted, broken version of myself stared back, makeup smeared by tears, skin torn and bleeding, a haunted look in my eyes. And then, from the kitchen doorway, came the sound I dreaded more than any physical blow. It was my father's laugh. He was leaning against the doorframe, a bottle of beer held loosely in his hand, watching the entire scene unfold as if it were a private comedy show put on for his entertainment. Finally, he said, a lazy smirk spreading across his face, "You shine like leather." Those words, so casual and so cruel, cut deeper than either of my mother's blows. My own father, finding amusement in my pain, grinning while I bled on the living room floor. Rachel finally decided the show was worth putting her phone down for. She rose to her feet, her own heels clicking on the floor, in a sound that felt like mocking applause. She glided over to me, examining my face with a clinical coldness. "She looks better this way," she said softly, her voice laced with poison, disguised as a compliment. I wanted to scream. I wanted to howl until my throat was raw. I wanted to grab the heavy brass lamp on the end table and smash it across their 3 perfect, cruel faces. But my body was paralyzed, locked in place by years of fear and intimidation. My knees felt weak, ready to buckle. My heart thundered against my ribs like a trapped bird. All I could do was stare at them, the architects of my misery. Mom stepped closer again, her hot wine-scented breath washing over my face. "Tomorrow," she whispered with venomous certainty, "you'll walk down that aisle, and not a single person will be looking at you. They will see Rachel, sitting there in all her beauty. They will see perfection. You will be the shadow, just like you have always been. Dad raised his beer in a mock toast, the bottle glinting under the chandelier. To the ugliest bride this town's ever seen, he slurred, and their combined laughter filled the room. A thick, suffocating cloud that I couldn't escape. I turned my face away, pressing my hand harder against the wound, feeling the blood seep warmly through my fingers. In that moment, something inside of me didn't just break. It cracked open and reformed into something hard and unyielding. They thought their cruelty would make me smaller, that their abuse would crush me into dust. They were wrong. I would not forget this. I would not forgive it, and when the time was right, the blood on my face would become a permanent stain on their precious legacy. I locked myself in my childhood bedroom, the same room where I had cried myself to sleep countless nights. I pressed tissues against the cuts on my face, wincing as I stared at the swollen, distorted stranger in the mirror. My left eye was already beginning to bloom into a dark shade of purple and blue. The gash along my brow continued to bleed in thin, stubborn lines, staining the tissues red almost as fast as I could replace them. The sounds of my family's normalcy carried through the thin walls, each one another twist of the knife. My mother's high-pitched laughter mingled with Rachel's as they gossiped about how desperate girls will marry anyone they can get. My father's booming voice joined my uncle's as they clinked beer bottles together in the den, completely untroubled by the violence that had just occurred. The sheer ordinariness of it all felt more insane than the attack itself. A desperate urge to run, to escape, clawed at me. I wanted to call Daniel, to pour out the whole ugly story and beg him to come and rescue me from this house of horrors. My hand hovered over my phone more than once, my thumb tracing the screen, but a deep fear held me back. What if he didn't believe me? What if he thought I was exaggerating, a drama queen looking for attention? What if he thought I was the problem, just as they had trained everyone in my life to believe? So, I sat in silence, staring at my bruised reflection, replaying Mom's shriek in my head, "Now you'll look uglier than your sister." And Dad's casual chuckle, "Finally, you shine like leather." The next morning, the house was a hive of activity, buzzing with the cheerful chaos of wedding preparations. The florist arrived with buckets of fragrant white roses. The caterers called with last-minute updates. Rachel strutted around the kitchen as if she were the queen, and this was her coronation day. I remained a ghost upstairs, trying to conceal the damage with layers of concealer and foundation. Every gentle stroke of the makeup brush felt like fire against my tender, swollen skin. Mom barged into my room without knocking, her heels announcing her arrival. She circled me again, but this time she was like a sculptor inspecting a piece of broken clay she was forced to display. "Better," she muttered, tilting my chin up with her fingers to get a better look at my face. "The ugliness suits you. Daniel won't even notice. He's completely blinded by pity." She spritzed a cloud of her overpowering perfume into the air and turned to leave. "Don't screw this up." I sat frozen on the vanity stool, the cloying scent of her perfume choking me. My hands were shaking, but my mind was a sea of calm. The seed of an idea that had been planted in the blood and tears of the night before had taken root. They thought I would endure this humiliation quietly. They had mistaken my silence for obedience for my entire life. But my silence was no longer weakness. My silence was me sharpening a blade. That afternoon, while everyone was distracted with their meaningless tasks, I slipped into my father's study. The room smelled of old cigars, leather, and his suffocating arrogance. His laptop was open on the desk. He was a man so convinced of his own power that he scribbled his passwords on sticky notes attached to the monitor, certain that no one would ever dare to snoop. Today, I dared. I opened a world he had kept hidden. Emails, financial statements, private messages, it was all there. A digital testament to his corruption. Proof of everything I had always suspected, but could never prove. Money being funneled from his company into secret offshore accounts. Calculated lies told to his business partners. A string of affairs carefully concealed under the guise of business trips. My hands trembled, but it wasn't from fear. It was from the exhilarating, terrifying realization that for the first time in my life, I held the power. Next, I found Rachel's phone, carelessly left charging on the kitchen counter. It took me seconds to find what I was looking for. Her message threads were a sewer of her cruelty, written in cold, black and white text. She looked like a clown. At the altar. Mom made sure of it. Screenshot. Save. Every laugh they had ever stolen from me. Every bruise they had inflicted. Every insult they had hurled now. I had their own words. Their own dirt. their own poison, right in the palm of my hand. That evening, Daniel came by for a quick, stolen moment before the wedding. The soft light on the porch couldn't hide the swelling on my face. "What happened?" he whispered, his eyes wide with concern as he reached for me. I pulled back gently, shaking my head. "Tomorrow," I said, and my voice was steady, solid, and colder than I had ever heard it before. "Tomorrow, you'll see everything." Because my wedding was no longer going to be about vows and rings and promises. It was going to be a reckoning. The church was aglow the next day, a picture of perfection filled with flowers and guests in their Sunday best. Rows of relatives and family friends whispered and smiled, snapping photos, eagerly awaiting the start of the ceremony. To them, this was just another happy wedding. To me, it was the stage I had been forced onto my entire life, except this time. I was the one directing the play. I stood behind the heavy wooden doors in my beautiful white gown, my face a mask of carefully applied makeup over a canvas of bruises. The makeup couldn't hide everything, but I no longer wanted it to. In fact, I wanted them to see. I wanted them to be forced to remember exactly what they had done. The organ music began to play. The doors swung open. I walked slowly, deliberately down the aisle, my heart beating a steady, determined rhythm. My parents sat in the front row, a perfect portrait of pride. Mom was dabbing at her dry eyes with a lace handkerchief, playing the role of the emotional mother. Dad puffed out his chest, smirking at the friends and colleagues whose respect he thought he commanded. And Rachel sat beside them in a shimmering gold dress, a smug smirk plastered across her face, as if she were the one everyone was there to celebrate. When I reached the altar, Daniel gave me a nervous but loving smile, his eyes searching mine. For an explanation, I gave his hand a reassuring squeeze. Then, I turned to face the hushed crowd. "Before we begin," I announced, my voice clear and strong. Echoing through the silent sanctuary, "there is something you all need to see." A ripple of gasps and confused murmurs rustled through the pews. In the front row, my mother's head snapped up, her act momentarily forgotten. Dad's smirk faltered. Rachel's triumphant expression froze, twisting into a frown of confusion. I lifted a small remote control that I had hidden inside my bouquet. The large screen that had been set up above the altar for a slideshow of the happy couple flickered to life, and then it began. First, a high-resolution photograph of my face from the night before appeared on the screen. Swollen, bleeding, mascara streaked with tears. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Then, Rachel's text messages flashed across the screen for all to see. She looked like a clown at the altar. Mom made sure of it. More gasps. Heads swiveled, to stare at Rachel, whose face had drained of all color. Next came my father's emails. The secret accounts, the stolen money, the lies to his company's board. His colleagues in the pews stared, their faces hardening with disgust. Then came my mother's gossiping emails, filled with cruel mockery of her friends, her neighbors, and even some of the guests sitting in that very church. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their polite smiles turning into glares of contempt. And then, for the grand finale, I played the recording. My phone was connected to the church's speaker system. My mother's raw, enraged scream filled the sacred space. "Now you'll look uglier than your sister." It was followed immediately by my father's deep, amused laugh and his words, "Finally, you shine like leather." The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavy, suffocating, and electric. Every single eye in that church turned to the front row, to my parents and my sister, who were now pinned in a spotlight of their own making. "She's lying," my mother shrieked, leaping to her feet, her face a blotchy mess of crimson. "She's making all of this up," but nobody believed her. Not with her own voice still echoing from the speakers. Not with the damning evidence flashing on the screen above her head. My father stood up. His fists clenched, but the power he had wielded his entire life was evaporating before his very eyes. Guests were already whispering loudly, "Disgusting. Monsters. How could they?" His business partners were staring at him with open disgust. His lifelong reputation, the thing he valued above all else, was shattered in less than 5 minutes. Rachel just sobbed, clutching her phone as if she could somehow delete the messages from the screen and from everyone's minds. "It was just a joke," she cried, but her friends were already edging away from her, their eyes cold and unforgiving. I took a step closer to the front pew, my voice low and steady. "You tried to destroy me on the night before my wedding. You tried to make me bleed, to humiliate me, to remind me that I was nothing." I let the words hang in the air before I delivered the final blow. But today, you will answer for it. I pointed to the marble floor in front of me. On your knees. The crowd fell into a stunned silence again. My parents stared at me, their eyes wide with disbelief. Never, my father hissed through clenched teeth. But the murmurs from the crowd began to swell. Apologize. Do it, beg. The weight of hundreds of staring, judgmental eyes pressed down on them until finally, the mighty fell. My father's knees hit the floor with a dull, pathetic crack. My mother followed a moment later, her body racked with sobs, mascara running in black rivers down her face. Rachel simply slumped beside them, collapsing in a heap of shame and shimmering gold fabric. I looked down at them. The three people who had built their empire on my pain and humiliation, now reduced to groveling in front of everyone they had ever wanted to impress. You wanted me to look uglier, I said, my voice as cold as the stone floor they knelt on. Now you're the ones covered in filth. You wanted me to shine like leather. Shine now. Let everyone see what you really are. Their hands trembled. Their lips moved, mumbling apologies that were hollow and meaningless. The guests, one by one, began to turn their backs on them. Their empire of lies was nothing but rubble. I turned to Daniel, my eyes burning with tears, but not of sadness. Now, I whispered, a real smile finally reaching my lips. Now we can begin. As we walked out of that church, hand in hand, the sound of applause followed us. It wasn't for them, it was for me. It was for the daughter who refused to stay silent, the bride who had turned her pain into power. And behind me, for the first time in their lives, my parents and sister weren't laughing. They were kneeling.